All right, let's go ahead and call the Senate to order. Sergeant at Arms will please secure the chamber doors. Members, please take your seats. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Mr. President,
All right, Senators, we are very pleased today to have the Reverend Dr. William Campbell Jr. of Union Bethel AME Church in Brandywine, Maryland, guest of the distinguished senator from the 27th District. Please rise for the invocation.
Let us pray. O God, our help in ages past, our hope for years to come, our shelter from the stormy blast, and our eternal home. Eternal and gracious God, we come to you today acknowledging that it is because of your goodness that we are blessed to stand in this historic and hallowed place. We come to give you thanks for another expression of your unlimited grace that provides us with another day in the land of the living. We thank you for the successful seating and beginnings of this 445th session of the General Assemblies of the great state of Maryland. We are thankful, great Creator, that you have kept and guided us through one of the most difficult seasons in our finite lifetime. We and our families, friends, co-workers, and colleagues have seen the fragility of our own mortality in ways that left an indelible impression upon our hearts and minds. Thank you for seeing us through the COVID-19 pandemic and allowing us to arrive at this present moment. We ask, O God, your blessings upon every town, from Frostburg to Pocomoke City, from Aberdeen to Lexington Park. Bless every elected official from the 157 municipalities and the 23 counties in Baltimore City. We ask, O God, your special blessing upon the 47 elected servants who comprise the 2023 Maryland Senate. Give them heavenly wisdom to address our human challenges and needs. We ask, O God, that you would strengthen the Senate staff and keep all of their families while they are engaged in this monumental work. We ask, O God, that you not only bless the proceedings of this chamber, but also the Assembly of Delegates, the Maryland Supreme Court, and our newly elected governor and lieutenant governor and their families. Please shelter and keep them from all harm. May their labors bring us all, not to what was, but to embrace and accept the new normal and the possibilities of a re-envisioned and brighter future. This is our earnest prayer and our sincere petition. Please hear us. Please guide us. Please bless us. Please keep us. In the name of God of all creation, we pray. Amen and amen.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Thank you. That's the voice of a preacher right there. The chair represents recognizing the senator from the 27th District.
Thank you, Mr. President and colleagues. Please help me welcome the pastor of the church of the man who stepped into the lives of me and my three siblings through my mom, my stepdad, one of the original members of Union Bethel Church in Brandywine, Maryland. Union Bethel Church sits on the property that was awarded in 1868. 2 acres of land. 1868 they were awarded, and then subsequently the church was built on that property in Brandywine, Maryland, where we have a number of members of my stepdad's family, the Hawkins family, are actually buried on that property. So it is an historical church. As you've heard me speak in this chamber oftentimes, Maryland has a very storied history, and we are rooted in that history. And I thank Pastor Campbell for being here today. And Mr. President, can we make sure that his words are journalized? And Pastor, enjoy your day with us as we serve our citizens of Maryland. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. And without objection, we certainly will journalize the Reverend's wonderful invocation this morning. Chair recognizes the Senator from Prince George's.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. My good Reverend, good friend, he's the pastor of a great church, a church in which I've been preaching since I was 25 years old, and preached in that church. And his former pastor, who went on to become the presiding bishop of the AME Church in the Alabama Conference. And then not many years later, I went on to be elected as the bishop of the Christian Church of Christ. And we both started seminary and went to school, and you've done a tremendous job there. And you're in my community. I'm glad to share this community with the senator from the 27th. And I'm thankful that you're here today.
Thank you for that reflection.
I need
Senator.
your voice. Amen.
Well said. Excellent. All right, has everyone recorded their presence in the chamber? It appears so. The clerk will take the call. With 46 members in the chamber and a quorum being present, the Senate of Maryland is now in session. Senators, we have a resolution. We have two resolutions today, one of which are guests from the Fightin' 46th. However, it's an establishment that many of you all likely know very well. It's an establishment, Mothers, which is in the heart of Federal Hill and has been sort of a stalwart small business, family-owned business for all 25 years. Now have opened up several locations, incredible community partners, work with the neighborhood associations. And so we have a resolution today recognizing their 25 years of operation here in the state of Maryland and in the city of Baltimore. We have Dave Rather, the owner. We have his son David, his wife Kelly, Terry Tragus, Adam Kernaw, and David Pollitt, who are here. And this is a special 25th anniversary celebration. Would ask the clerk to read the resolution in full.
Be it hereby known to all that the Senate of Maryland offers the sincerest congratulations to Mothers Federal Hill Grill in recognition of your 25th anniversary. Thank you for your dedication to serving the community. The entire membership extends its best wishes on this memorable occasion and directs this resolution be presented on this 10th day of March, 2023.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? If so, the clerk will take the call. To the entire Mothers team, we want to thank you. The Senate of Maryland unanimously celebrates your 25th anniversary and appreciates all you have done and will do in the years ahead. Congratulations. Congratulations. We're honored by you all being here today. Enjoy. Thank you. Thank you. All right. We also have a resolution from the senator from Baltimore City and Baltimore County.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like the body to join me in honoring or recognizing Executive Director Karan Sadler, Stephen Asano, Jim McCobb, and Neil Bergsman. They are the leadership, or part of the leadership of the Maryland Association of Resources for Families and Youth. And it is their 50th anniversary of providing, being the state partners in providing foster care, group home, and other services for more than 200 programs across the state of Maryland. The Murphy represents providers who serve Maryland's most vulnerable children who are in and out of placement due to abuse, neglect, and severe mental health and medical needs. They operate group homes and provide services for juveniles as well. One of their partners said, "I cannot put a value on what Murphy does. More than being an organization of members, it is an assembly which is an intense passion and drive, committed to improving the lives of every single youth in Maryland."
All right. We believe we have a resolution. The clerk will read the resolution in full.
Be it hereby known to all that the Senate of Maryland offers its sincerest congratulations to Maryland Association of Resources for Family and Youth in recognition of celebrating 50 years of improving the system of care for youth and families in the state. The entire membership extends its best wishes on this memorable occasion and directs this resolution be presented on this 10th day of March, 2023.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? It appears so. The clerk will take the call. To the representatives of the Maryland Association of Resources for Families and Youth, we want to thank you for your 50 years of service, and we need it now more than ever in this very, very uncertain time. We thank you. Congratulations. All right, other introductions today. Additional introductions. Yes, Chair recognizes Senator from Prince George's.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, colleagues. I'd like to acknowledge the presence behind me in the gallery of the Extend Homeschool Tutorial. Founded in 2017, this organization homeschools families by bringing them together with highly skilled and passionate tutors, providing group classes in subjects like English, language arts, math, science, just to name a few. Their mission is Christian-centered as they fulfill a calling to educate and train their children and teens with excellence to grow in wisdom, knowledge, and spirituality. Extend is based out of the beautiful 23rd Legislative District, who has 2 campuses and 2 great churches in my district, Mount Oak Church and Judah Temple AME. Colleagues, please extend a warm wish and welcome to the director, Ms. Kim Kent, and the entire Extend Homeschool family.
Welcome, welcome. Thanks for joining us today. A little experiential learning today. We are also joined in the balcony by 12 students from St. Mary's College of Maryland. This is the students who are participating in the state and local politics class with Professor Todd Emberley. I have utilized this class to have a number of folks come work in my own office, and so I'm so thankful for them being here today and the work that they do to really understand state and local politics. So if we could please welcome the folks from St. Mary's College. Chair recognizes the senator from the 37th District.
Thank you, Mr. President, and it's an honor of the Protocol Committee to welcome this morning, and I believe they're up in the balcony. It's the Secretary of State Susan Lee and Ben Wu, Vice Chair of the U.S. Asia Institute, along with representatives from the embassies of Malaysia, Singapore, the Philippines, Myanmar, the People's Republic of China, Cambodia, Lao People's Democratic Republic, Indonesia, Mongolia, South Korea, as well as members of the Hong Kong Economic Trade Office. I'd urge the body to extend a warm welcome to our guests this morning.
Excellent.
We
welcome. I think we're doing it in absentia at the moment. I think they were called to the governor's office, so we will let you know, Senator, when they arrive. I think they're going to join us in a bit.
I apologize.
No, wonderful.
And the Protocol Committee voted this morning, and we decided we voted to change up a little bit. Usually we wait to the end for announcements, and so today, but we're going to change it around a little bit. Today's a special day for District 47, colleagues. It's a very special day. Our Speaker Pro Tem, permission to use the senator's name.
Try again.
District 47, right? President, yeah. President Pro Tem.
There we go.
President Pro Tem, I got it, okay. Every day is an education. It's a wonderful thing, I tell you. So I hope that adds to the celebration. Permission to use the senator's name.
Senator may proceed.
With that, we'd like to extend a warm birthday celebration to our very own Senator Augustine. Happy birthday.
Happy birthday. Everywhere you wanted to be, right here, right now.
And to keep the celebration alive, we have another important day to recognize, and that's tomorrow, because District 24 is going to be celebrating. That's right. Permission to use the senator's name. It is our very own Senator Benson's birthday. Let's give her a warm birthday welcome.
Senator, I just can't believe she's going to be celebrating her 29th birthday. It's just amazing. Chair recognizes the looming birthday, Senator. Yeah. Senator for Prince George's.
Thank you, Mr. President. Point of personal privilege here. I've been talking to my staff, and I said, now listen, we're not going to talk about birthdays this weekend. So I thought that they understood, but apparently they didn't. So I walked in my office this morning, and on my desk, I want to share with you all, and when you come by here, I want you to see it. This is a framed picture of my great friend, Wayne Keith Carey, and me, and Wayne Keith Carey and Judge Herman Dawson. I want you all to know that these two pictures are very important to me, because When Wayne decided to run for the county executive seat, there were only 2 elected officials in Prince George's County who supported him. One was me, and the other was Senator Decatur Wayne Bucky Trotter. And we were told that he would never win. One of the finest things that ever happened in Prince George's County was the election of Wayne Keith Curry as our county executive. He made wonderful things happen. But the second person featured here is Judge Herman Dawson. Judge Herman Dawson hails from Alabama. His mother walked across the Everett Pettus Bridge with John Lewis. She was beaten. She was struck in her head. She was never the same. She passed away not knowing who her children were. But when the judge came to us and told us that he wanted to become the judge, and because of the wonderful service that he had rendered working in the 24th Legislative District, Senator Trotter and Wayne Curry and I went to the governor to appeal for him to become the judge. These pictures in this frame probably is one of the finest birthday presents that I could receive. And I want to thank you all for what you all do here. I'm a little over the hill. I'm 28 years old tomorrow.
28.
But I want you all to know that God has been good to me. And as long as I'm down here, I want to continue to be the kind of servant that he would have me to be as I sit in this chamber watching. I've seen a lot of stuff going on in the 28 years that I've been down here. And I want you all to know that I'm in excellent health. For those of you who think I'm going to be leaving, I will be here until I'm 104 years old. So you're going to have to put up with me. So I want to thank you all, and I want to thank you all for being the wonderful role models that you are for the youngsters who come here. When I walk in here in the morning, I say to these youngsters that are seated here, good morning, rising stars. Good morning, Hallmark cards, because we need to encourage our youngsters, and that is one of the reasons why I'm glad to be here, to encourage our youngsters to do well. And they come to me and say, Senator Benson, you are an awesome woman, and I want you all to know that I really appreciate that. And I kind of feel that way myself. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Happy birthday. The one and only. Yes. Chair recognizes the co-chair of the Protocol Committee.
Thank you, Mr. President. And to follow that, we'd like to now recognize our pages, our youngsters right here.
If we could ask the Majority Leader and Minority Leader to join us at the front so we can do the final send-offs. Senator may proceed.
So I will name the page, or we'll call the pages by name. Our first page, Anne Arundel County, District 30, Severna Park High School, Amelia Farrar. Our next page, Anne Arundel County, District 33B, Crofton High School, Alexander Hosenkale. Our next page, Howard County, District 12, Wild Lake High School, Oliver Song. And our last page, Montgomery County, District 20, James Hubert Blake High School, Muhammad Wali.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Senator. Thank you for recognizing our great pages, and they still have a busy day today, so don't slack off. We'll take that's right. We got a busy day today, but you've done a great job, and it's been an honor to have you all. All right, any further business or introductions before we jump into the work of the day? We got a fair amount today, so. All right, let's go ahead and waive the reading of the journal from the prior legislative day, and we've got some message from the House of Delegates. This is number 8. Clerk will read the bills.
House Bill 50, Delegate Lopez, action to collect a private education loan, required documents, judicial proceedings.
Majority Leader moves so be considered the reading of the bills. We have another message from the House of Delegates. This is calendar 9. Clerk will read the bills.
House Bill 6, Delegate Hill, Department of General Services, Energy Conserving Standards, Maryland Sustainability Buildings Act of 2023, Education, Energy, the Environment. House Bill 23, Delegate Stewart.
Majority Leader moves so be considered the reading of the bills. They'll be referred to their appropriate standing committees. We have a message from the governor, message from the executive. Clerk will read the message.
Dear President Ferguson, in accordance with Article 2, Section 13 of the Constitution of Maryland, I am pleased to submit the following appointment nominations for confirmation by the Maryland State Senate. These individuals bring exceptional knowledge and the ability to the offices for which they have been nominated. I am confident they will provide the strength of expertise and leadership to instill confidence among our citizens and ensure we succeed in our goals for Marylanders. I look forward to your favorable approval of these nominees. Thank you for your assistance and support. Sincerely, Wes Moore, Governor.
Message having been read is ordered journalized. These appointments will be referred to the Executive Nominations Committee for consideration. Senators, we have some folks that have to leave a little bit earlier today, so we're going to take up executive noms and third readers first. If we could do a quick quorum call before we do the executive noms, which is the special order number 27. Has everyone recorded their presence? If so, the clerk will take the, if we could ring the bells. All right. All right, the clerk will take the call. With 46 members in the chamber and a quorum being present, the Senate of Maryland remains in session. We've got special order calendar number 27. Clerk will read the report.
Executive Nominations Report number 5. The question is, will the Senate advise and consent to the nominations of the executive?
All right, Senators, the question is, shall the Senate advise and consent to the nominations of the executive? Chair recognizes the Chair of the Executive Nominations Committee.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is for report number 5 that we heard this past Monday. The list is on your laptop under other.
Perfect.
Are there any questions?
All right. Are there any names that senators wish to separate or vote independently? If not, the question remains: will the Senate advise and consent to the nominations of the executive? The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President.
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 46 votes in the affirmative, the Senate advises and consents affirmatively to the nominations of the executive. Let's go ahead and move to third reading calendar number 18. Clerk will read the first bill.
Senate Bill 33, Senator Carter, Correctional Services, Parole, Life Imprisonment.
Senate Bill 33 is on third reader for final passage. Chair recognizes the senator from Western Maryland as the floor, or excuse me, on the bill.
Correct. Thank you, Mr. President. Will the floor leader yield for a question?
It appears so. Senator may proceed.
So we were talking about this the other day. There was a question that was asked about what type of crimes we were talking about, and I don't think that was ever really articulated. What type of crimes are we talking about here with life imprisonment with parole?
Oh, we're talking about the most serious crimes. So this bill is definitely addressing life imprisonment. And as I said the other day, when we passed a bill in 2021 that removed the governor from having an impact on parole decisions, this particular group of people who happen to be the chronically ill are the only ones that now have to still have the governor involved in the parole decision because they were in a different section of the code, and so they weren't included in the bill that we passed to let them out. So in my opinion, even if one were opposed to the original bill, it wouldn't make a lot of sense to oppose this group because this is literally the chronically ill and probably the most vulnerable and those that would need the most to be able to be released upon a parole board decision. And as I said, there was testimony that since 2021, when we passed the other legislation, there were 5 people that were chronically ill, but because the governor hadn't signed off on the parole decision for their release, they actually passed away while incarcerated. So I really don't think this ought to be controversial, even if one ideologically disagrees.
Well, I guess when you say chronically ill, and it talks about medical parole, there's a wide gamut there, potentially, of what that could be potentially as far as what is chronic. I mean, are we talking about, how are we defining that?
It's a medical diagnosis, and there are specifics that I actually read through the other day, but I no longer have the sheet, but it's a section of our code. It talks about someone that is so disabled and incapacitated that it's not possible that they could cause a threat to the public safety. 1 second, I can get you the exact language. Well, maybe it's not in the bill. It's in the statute. If I... It's
not in the bill because it's separate.
Right, it's separate. 7301. Can I take a minute? Because I had this with me the other day, but honestly, in anticipation, I took it back with me. I have the language.
Why don't we just, how about we special order it to the end of the calendar?
That's fine.
Any objections to that? Nope. All right, let's special order it to the end of this particular calendar.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator. All right, without objection, the bill will be special ordered to the end of the calendar. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 67, Senator Bidel, Clerks of the Circuit Court, Civil Commission's presentation and reporting.
Senate Bill 67 is on third reader for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 46 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 67, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 71, Senator Brooks, execution on a judgment, child support arrears, workers' compensation.
Senate Bill 71 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 46 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 71, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 135, Senator Carrozza, Worcester County Alcoholic Beverages, Ocean City Promoter's License.
Senate Bill 135 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 46 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 135, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 257, Senator Waldstreicher, Task Force to Assess the Viability for No-Charge Phone Calls for State Incarcerated Individuals, Keeping Families Connected Act of 2023.
Senate Bill 257 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 35 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 257, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 303, Senator Moutz, Talbot County Speed Monitoring Systems, intersection of Maryland Route 333, Oxford Road, and Bonfield Avenue.
Senate Bill 303 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 36 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 303, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 304, Carroll County Senators, Carroll County Alcoholic Beverages, modification of seating requirements.
Senate Bill 304 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 46 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 304, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 306, Carroll County Senators, Carroll County Alcoholic Beverages, multiple event entertainment licenses.
Senate Bill 306 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 46 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 306, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 385, Senator McKay, criminal procedure restitution orders, recording fees.
Senate Bill 385 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 46 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 385, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 393, Carroll County Senators, Carroll County Alcoholic Beverage Licenses Residency Requirement.
Senate Bill 393 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. 46 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 393, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 440, Senator Hayes, Baltimore City Alcoholic Beverages District's Legislative Districting Plan references as an emergency bill.
Senate Bill 440 is on third reading for final passage. Senators, this is an emergency bill. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 46 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 440, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Senators, before we take up the special order, if our co-chair from our protocol committee has the list, I believe we have guests from the Asian embassies from across East Asia. I believe we have our Secretary of State is here with us. On the other side. Okay, wonderful. Welcome back to our wonderful Secretary of State, our former member. We are so thrilled, and Mr. Protocol Chair, if you could welcome our guests.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. President. On behalf of the Senate and the Protocol Committee, it's an honor to welcome everyone in the balcony. Colleagues, we have representatives from the Embassy of Malaysia, Singapore, the Philippines, Myanmar, the People's Republic of China, Cambodia, Laos People's Democratic Republic, Indonesia, Mongolia, South Korea, as well as members from the Hong Kong Economic and Trade Office. Welcome. Thank you for visiting us, and please, a warm round of applause.
Welcome, welcome.
Many thanks.
We are truly honored by your presence and very thrilled that you all could be here with us today. Our connections to East Asia run deep and are essential, and so we're just so thankful that you all could join us today and see our state-level government in action. All right, we do have a special order. If the clerk could please pull up the special order.
Senate Bill 33, Senator Carter, Correctional Services, Parole, Life Imprisonment.
Chair recognizes the floor leader.
Thank you so much. Sorry for that pause. The section that I was referring to is Correctional Services 7-309, Section B, and the specific language already in law for medical parole is an inmate who is so chronically debilitated or incapacitated by a medical or mental health condition, disease, or syndrome as to be physically incapable of presenting a danger to society may be released on medical parole at any time during the term of the inmate's sentence without regard to eligibility status. So that's the language already in there, and it has to be a diagnosis from a medical professional. It's my understanding very difficult for inmates to fit this criteria to be absolutely incapable of posing a threat. So that's it.
Do we know how many people fit that criteria?
I don't
have in
know.
the past?
I don't know.
Okay.
It's a minuscule number, it's my understanding. Five. Well, I don't know. I'm told 5, but that sounds 5 diagnosed and 5 not released.
Who makes the parole decision?
The parole board.
And how are they selected?
They're gubernatorial appointees?
So they're not voted on by the citizens?
No.
Right now, currently, who would make that decision?
I got it. I was listening. You had another question?
I was asking how they were selected, and there was a lot of chatter here, but I didn't hear your response. I apologize.
Oh, they're nominated by the governor, and then they go through the processes, a lot of appointees, executive nominations, and then confirmed by the Senate.
So currently, without this passing, who makes the ultimate decision?
Who makes the ultimate decision? Well, in all parole decisions now, outside of these chronically ill people, the parole board makes the decision without any input from the governor, any final say by the governor. We passed a bill in 2021 that removed the governor from these parole decisions, but again, this small number of people that fall into the chronically ill category, because they're in a different section of the code than the other parolees, they were excluded. It was really a technical error. We certainly didn't intend to allow other people to be released as a result of a parole board, potentially, and without the governor's input, but say only these really ill people have to still go through this additional hurdle. And so I really think, this is not a bill that should cause any consternation.
Okay, well, I appreciate that. Thank you. Mr. President.
On the bill, Senator, may
on the
proceed.
bill, I appreciate the comments, and I appreciate the small number. We talk middle school and things of that nature. But we're not talking about the victims here. These individuals have committed the most heinous crimes, as the floor leader said. We're talking about rapists, murderers, people that have murdered women and children. And because they have a heart condition, we talk about violent crime and what we're doing, what we have done. And this here before us is what we're doing for violent crime. We want to take the decision out of the hands of someone who is elected by the people for people that have, again, committed the most heinous things that one could do. And I appreciate, the conversation. I appreciate what the intent perhaps is. But when we continue to have violent crime across our state, and this is the message we're going to send to our citizens, the violent criminals are coming back out. And for all those reasons, I can't support this bill. Thank you, Mr. President.
All right, thank you, Senator. Chair recognizes the sponsor of the bill.
Mr. President, I just want to make a correction, a clarification. This is not addressing a person, an inmate with a heart condition. I can think to a couple of sessions ago, a not so young woman that I met, Barbara, who was an inmate who was in stage 4 terminal cancer, and she wasn't able to be released. This is for people like that are incapacitated from even barely functioning on their own, that cost the taxpayers money, a lot of money, because of their health care needs, to even be incarcerated. And it's really falls into the realm of cruel and inhumane to continue to hold them in there when they're in that state. For anyone that's concerned about people getting released that have committed terrible crimes, I understand that concern. And I don't think that that's happening much, because our parole board isn't generally releasing people, in a very arbitrary way. There are certain standards that these people have to meet. But under the current law, a person in perfect health is eligible to be released by the parole board under certain conditions without any type of sanctioning by the governor. And so all this bill does is say that this small group of people would also be capable of being released by a parole board decision without having the governor sign off on it. So for those reasons, I'd urge a favorable vote on this bill. I think it's actually the humane thing to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. All right, are there any senators who have not yet spoken on the bill who wish to speak? If not, Chair recognizes the senator from District 2.
No, and I appreciate that, and I think we all have compassion for individuals in those situations. But again, I can't stress enough the victims of people that were killed, murdered, and we're talking about having compassion for the murderer. And I mean, it doesn't make sense. So again, I appreciate it, and thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Chair recognizes the chair of the committee.
Thanks. I just want to make sure we all understand the process, because this is actually not that radical of a change, and it is very sensitive to victims and their families. Because right now, the way it works is the Maryland Parole Commission makes a recommendation whether someone should be eligible, is granted parole. The governor now then has 180 days to make that decision. If the governor doesn't do anything, then the Parole Commission's decision stands. What this is saying is that people that are chronically ill now have the same process that everyone else does in Maryland. The Maryland Parole Commission is comprised of experts, people with decades of experience that balance and weigh a lot of different factors before they make a decision. So This isn't, going to change that. It's very sensitive to the victims and their families, and this is the humane thing to do. It's just level setting the entire process for parole. So I'm gladly supporting this bill.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Any further discussion? If not, the clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President,
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 36 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 33, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. We've got third reading calendar number 19. Clerk will read the first bill.
Senate Bill 450, Senator Guile, Real Property Limitations on Summoning Law Enforcement or Emergency Services Prohibition.
All right, Senate Bill 450 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President,
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 46 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 450, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 469, Senator Elfreth, Task Force to Study Solar Tax Incentives.
Senate Bill 469 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President,
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 46 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 469, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 472, Senator Elfreth, City of Annapolis, Alcoholic Beverages, Art Establishment.
Senate Bill 472, third reading, final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President,
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 46 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 472, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 478, Senator Sidnor, Maryland Lynching Truth and Reconciliation Commission Reporting and Sunset Extension.
Senate Bill 478 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President,
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 46 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 478, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 486, Senator McCray, Baltimore City Sheriff Staffing.
Senate Bill 486 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President,
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 45 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 486, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 491, Charles County Senators, Charles County Task Force to Study School Bus Operator Contracts and Wages.
Senate Bill 491, third reading, final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President,
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 46 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 491, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 519, Charles County Senators, Charles County Alcoholic Beverages, Unlicensed Establishments.
Senate Bill 519 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President,
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 46 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 519, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 527, Senator Waldstreicher, Fire Rescue or Emergency Medical Services Entities Peer Support Programs.
Senate Bill 527 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President,
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 46 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 527, having received the constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 535, Senator James, Human Relations, Housing Discrimination, Service Dogs.
Senate Bill 535 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President,
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 46 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 535, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Congratulations. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 588, Senator Hayes, Baltimore City, 40th District, Alcoholic Beverages.
Senate Bill 588 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President,
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 46 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 588, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 651, Senator Carter, Real Estate Brokerage Services, and Termination of Residential Real Estate Contracts, the Anthony Mormon Act.
Senate Bill 651 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote? Explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 46 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 651, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. All right, we've got third reading calendar number 20. Oh, yes, Chair, recognizes Senator from District 2.
Senate Bill 450, can be recorded in the red.
450, green to red. Any objections? Without objection, so ordered. Any more? If not, let's go to third reading calendar number 20. Clerk will read the first bill.
Senate Bill 654, Senator Gallion, Harford County Alcoholic Beverages, Class HC Health Club License.
Senate Bill 654 is on third reading for final passage. Pickleball. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote? Explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 46 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 654, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed, and Harford takes the lead for Pickleball Dynasty. All right, clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 705, Chair, Judicial Proceedings, Vehicle Loss Certificate of Title, Surviving Spouse.
Senate Bill 705 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote? Explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 46 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 705, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 706, Chair, Judicial Proceedings, Child Support, Reporting of Employment Information Independent Contractors.
Senate Bill 706 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote? Explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 46 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 706, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 707, Public Safety, Deputy State Fire Marshal, Prohibitionary Status and Promotion.
Senate Bill 707 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote? Explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 46 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 707, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 709, Chair, Judicial Proceedings, Motor Vehicles, Commercial Driver's License, and Instructional Permits, Revisions.
Senate Bill 709 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote? Explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 46 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 709, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 711, Chair, Judicial Proceedings, Child Support, Sports Wagering, and Fantasy Competition, Intercept.
Senate Bill 711 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote? Explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 45 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 711, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 738, Senator Gallion, Harford County Alcoholic Beverages, Performing Arts Theater License.
Senate Bill 738 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote? Explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 46 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 738, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 792, Senator West, Estates and Trusts, Registered Domestic Partnerships.
Senate Bill 792 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote? Explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 46 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 792, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 797, Senator Hedelman, Task Force on Preventing and Countering Elder Abuse.
Senate Bill 797 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote? Explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 46 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 797, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 821, Senator McKay, Garrett County Alcoholic Beverages Act of 2023.
Senate Bill 821 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 45 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 821, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 847, Senator Hayes, Baltimore City Alcoholic Beverages Violation Procedures and Fines.
Senate Bill 847 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 46 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 847, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 867, Senator Zucker, Vehicle Laws, Special and Commemorative Registration Plates, Maryland Heroes.
Senate Bill 867 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 46 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 867, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. All right, Senators, let's go to the Finance Committee. We have some second readers. Let's get through those. This is report number 13. Clerk will read the first bill.
Senate Bill 136, Senator Klossmeyer, Unemployment Insurance Recovery of Benefits Limitation and Methods, favorable, one amendment.
All right, Chair recognizes the sponsor of the bill as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President and members of the Senate. Senate Bill 136 limits the amount that the Secretary of Labor may deduct from weekly benefits payable to an unemployment insurance claimant when recovering benefits over payments that are unrelated to fraud. Specifically, the Secretary may only deduct up to 50% from the weekly benefits payable to the claimant in the future, or if the weekly benefit amount is $100 or less, up to 25%. Other overpayment collection options remain unchanged. The amendment delays the effective date from October 1st, 2023 to April 1st, 2024, and there was no opposition at the committee hearing. I move the amendment and the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves to the adoption of the one committee amendment and the favorable committee report. On the amendment, any discussion? Any objections to the amendment? Without objection, the one committee amendment is adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? If not, all in favor of the report say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The favorable committee report as amended is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 136 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 494, Senator Guile, Maryland State Department of Education, Employee Status and Designation, favorable.
Chair recognizes the bill sponsor as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 494 requires the Secretary of Budget and Management to complete a process started several years ago by finishing the assignment of employees in the Maryland State Department of Education to the State Personnel Management System, except for employees that are bona fide special appointments, and to assign each employee in the professional service and skilled service to the appropriate bargaining unit. There are no amendments. There is no fiscal impact. There was no opposition at the committee hearing. I move the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? If not, all in favor of the report say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 494 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 607, Senator Ferguson, Baltimore City Alcoholic Beverages, 46th Alcoholic Beverages District revisions.
Senate Bill 607. Chair recognizes the senator from Baltimore City as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 607 alters provisions of the alcoholic beverage laws in Baltimore City, specifically provisions related to the 46th Alcoholic Beverage District. The bill allows a liquor license for a certain restaurant owned by a nonprofit to be extended to a new location. It also allows a liquor license for a restaurant at a certain location if it has a duck pin bowling alley and meets a minimum capital investment requirement. The license is exempt from certain minimum seating and food sale requirements and is non-transferable. In addition, the bill establishes a process by which Class D beer and light wine license holders may convert that license to a Class D beer, wine, and liquor license if specified requirements are met, such as maintaining a minimum of 51% daily average of receipts from food sales and executing a memorandum of understanding with the local neighborhood association. The bill also eases license transfer requirements in Ward 3, Precinct 3 by allowing a transfer to an establishment with a seating capacity of up to 200 individuals and extends the expiration date of the license in a certain location so it can be transferred to a new owner. There are no amendments. There was no opposition at the committee hearing. I move adoption of a favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the favorable committee report. Welcome to the 46th District. Any discussion? If not, all in favor of the report say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 607 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 726, Chair, Finance Committee, State Board of Examiners of Psychologists, Sunset Extension.
Chair recognizes
Favorable one amendment.
Senator from the 12th District has the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is the first of 4 bills that deal with sunset extensions, all by request of the department. Sunset extensions typically pertain to the health occupations boards and a few other boards. These are all health occupations boards extensions, and this just allows for the boards to continue to function. They're periodically reviewed by DLS every few years. As amended, this bill, 726, extends the termination date for the State Board of Examiners of Psychologists to July 1st, 2025. The amendment alters from 2026 to 2025 the termination date for the board. There's no fiscal impact. I move the amendment and the adoption of the favorable committee report.
All right, the floor leader moves to the adoption of the one committee amendment and the favorable committee report. On the amendment, any discussion? Any objections to the committee amendment? Without objection, the one committee amendment is adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? If not, all in favor of the report say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The favorable committee report as amended is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 726 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 727, Chair, Finance Committee, State Board of Physical Therapy Examiners, Sunset Extension. Favorable one amendment.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 12th District as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is the second of 4 sunset extensions. This bill pertains to the State Board of Physical Therapy Examiners and is a departmental bill that extends the termination date for the State Board of Physical Therapy Examiners to July 1st, 2025. There is an amendment. The amendment alters the date from 2027 to 2025, which is the termination date for the board. There's no fiscal impact. I move the adoption of the amendment and the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves to the adoption of the one committee amendment and the favorable committee report. On the amendment, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the one committee amendment is adopted. Question on the amendment report. Any discussion? If not, all in favor of the report say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The favorable committee report as amended is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 727 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 728, Chair, Finance Committee, State Board of Examiners and Optometry, Sunset Extension. Favorable one amendment.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 12th District as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is the third of 4 departmental bills. This one is a sunset extension for the State Board of Examiners and Optometry. It extends the termination date for the board to July 1st, 2025. There is an amendment. The amendment alters the termination date from 2026 to 2025 for the board. There's no fiscal impact. I move the adoption of the amendment and the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the one committee amendment and the favorable committee report. On the amendment, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the one committee amendment is adopted. Question now is on the favorable report as amended. Any discussion? If not, all in favor of the report say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The favorable committee report as amended is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 728 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 731, Chair, Finance Committee, State Board for Certification of Residential Child Care Program Professional, Sunset Extension. Favorable one amendment.
4 of 4. Senator from District 12.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is for the last departmental bill for a sunset extension. This Health Occupations Board pertains to the Board of Certification of Residential Child Care Program Professionals, Senate Bill 731. It extends the termination date for this board to July 1st, 2025. There is an amendment that alters the termination date from 2027 to 2025 for the board. There's no fiscal impact. Move the adoption of the single amendment and the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the one committee amendment and the favorable committee report. On the amendment, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the one committee amendment is adopted. Question now is on the favorable report as amended. Any discussion? If not, all in favor of the report say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The favorable committee report as amended is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 731 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. All right, let's go to the layover calendar, number 13. Clerk will read the bill.
Senate Bill 798, Senator Ferguson, Declaration of Rights, Right to Reproductive Freedom. Question is on the adoption of the one amendment offered from the floor by Senator Hershey.
All right, Senators, the question before the body is the floor amendment offered by the Minority Leader. Let's, if we could hear from the Minority Leader to remind us on that amendment.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Yes, this was a simple one-word amendment that we were asking to add the word safely into the description of the reproductive services. And I think we had made a point over last year's debate and this year's debate that there was certainly a concern that after we expanded access for these types of services last year, it was done in a very fast, quick pace, and we wanted to make sure that with respect, since this is a medical procedure, that it was known through all Marylanders, if this is going into the Constitution, that these would be required to be done in a safe manner. So I move the amendment.
Senator has moved the amendment. Let's hear from the floor leader on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would urge the body to reject the amendment. This issue has already been litigated. The language in the amendment, and the constitutional amendment, is sufficient. Maryland law already defines a qualified abortion provider as a licensed healthcare professional for whom the provision of abortion is within their scope of practice. Licensed health professionals can only provide health services, whether abortion or any other type of service, for which they are competent. It is already their professional obligation as healthcare providers to provide medical care safely and within their scope of practice. So consequently, Mr. President, I would urge the body to resist this amendment.
All right. On the amendment, any further discussion? Chair recognizes the Minority Whip on the amendment.
If I could just ask the floor leader a question.
Will the floor leader yield for a question?
Yes.
Senator may proceed.
Can you relay to me what would be wrong with adding the word safely, since this is going to be a ballot question?
As I mentioned earlier, this issue has already been litigated. We've already discussed this in the Abortion Care Access Act of last session. It's already within the scope of practice and the professional obligations of the healthcare provider in order to provide medical care safely and within the standard of care. So it's the language that we already have existing as written in the bill is sufficient.
Have we promulgated, if I may continue, Mr. President, has this Department of Health promulgated regulations for these? Because last year the bill we passed allowed other health occupations to perform abortions, including abortion surgeries, to the latest in a pregnancy. Has the state promulgated regulations for those other health occupations?
And thank you for the question. It is my understanding that providers have already been regulated, so I would say yes.
Okay. Mr. President, this is one of those, thank you for the answers.
On the amendment, Senator may proceed.
This is one of those things I can't quite understand why it would be such a great thing to show good faith to just accept an amendment to add safely into the language. I can't understand why we would not accept that as a friendly amendment. I would urge the body just to add the word safely, and right before we talk about either deciding to keep or terminate a pregnancy, I think the word safely is a great addition to the bill to make it very clear what the intent is. So I would also support the amendment.
All right. Chair recognizes the senator from District 6 on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yeah, I'd just like to mention in a lot of areas in life period, there's bad actors. And as we know, bad actors, they're not following the law. And if we want to follow the law, we got to make sure we have good actors. And I think this is a proper word that we should be able to vote on, just safely. And we understand what that word means. Public safety is very important. Safety in our schools is important. Everything that we do in safety is a very important word, and it's a very good meaning. We just want to make sure people do things safely and do it the right way. So, Mr. President, I believe this is just a word, a common word that we know very well, but a word that I think that could apply in a way to have a better understanding why we're doing this, if we want to do this, if we're voting for this. But safely, I think the word is defined in itself, and I think we should vote for this amendment. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator. On the amendment, Chair recognizes the senator from the 38th District.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll be brief. And I appreciate the floor leader kind of went through that history, but it was kind of kind of assuming a lot of people know that, and this is going on a ballot question, and a little bit of a kind of a legalese bureaucratic response to that, when all we're trying to do is add the word safely to make it clear. So I think we assume a lot of knowledge. We're here in the thick of it, but I can tell you the average person, that's pretty much a no-brainer. Okay, let's just put it in safely. So I rise in very strong support of this amendment.
Thank you, Senator. Are there any senators who have not yet spoken who wish to speak? If not, we hear from the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. If I could just further respond. So I think by adding this language, it makes the implication that somehow abortion health care providers are bad actors. There are already existing regulations for medical providers. They already have to comply with the standard of care within their scope of practice. I think the language is unnecessary, and as we already have regulations on medical providers. So thank you, Mr. President.
All right, on the amendment, any further discussion? Any senators who have not yet spoken who wish to speak? If not, Chair recognizes the maker of the amendment.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. If you would recall from last year's piece of legislation, one of the biggest changes that we made is we struck the word physician and we put in qualified provider, which expanded this opportunity for people that could perform these services. And so we went from a physician to now a nurse practitioner, a nurse midwife, a licensed certified midwife, a physician's assistant, or any other individual, as long as they are licensed or authorized by law to practice in the state. So that's the concern, not to say that there are some bad actors, that there are people that are not qualified to provide these services. And we questioned that very much last year as well, too. We tried to make changes to this section of the bill that was provided. So I think this is something that doesn't hurt. It does show there's some empathy for this, that there is concern, that we want to make sure that these services are provided in a safe manner and that people can be assured that without having to go back to last year's bill and read through it to say, hey, is everything really okay? It's right in the Constitution, right where this is supposed to be. Thank you. And could I request a roll call?
Thank you. And senators request a roll call. Any further discussion on the amendment? Chair recognizes the senator from Anne Arundel on the amendment.
Thank you. If the floor leader would yield.
Floor yield. Appears so. Senator may proceed.
So if I understand your logic in this, you're saying we don't need this amendment because it's already in law and regulation and it's covered.
Yes, that's correct.
But yesterday, and what I've heard about this bill, is abortion is in our law already, but we want to enshrine it in the Constitution. So why wouldn't we want to enshrine the safe abortion? I don't understand the logic there.
Well, sure. Thank you for the question. So what we're doing here with this bill is simple and significant. It's creating the legal standard by which any litigation or any legislation in the future would be challenged on, and it just enshrining that right to reproductive freedom in the Constitution. So as far as adding, like as I mentioned before, the addition of the word safely is just quite not necessary, because we already have regulations requiring a healthcare provider to provide medical care within the standard of care, within their scope of practice. It's consequently presumed that they're going to be providing medical care safely.
So we don't need it because it's already in law, but we need to enshrine abortion that is already in law. For some unknown reason, the two, it just seems not to line up with one another, but I appreciate your answer.
And if I could respond, Mr. President, the question isn't so much that whether or not abortion, it's true that there's a viability standard that we have in our law. The question is the lack of that constitutional protection, which no longer exists because of the Dobbs decision. There was a constitutional protection that we previously had as for reproductive freedom, and that was lost by the Dobbs decision. And so that's why this constitutional amendment is necessary. Thank you.
All right. Are there any senators who have not yet spoken who wish to speak? If not, Chair recognizes the minority whip on the amendment.
Mr. President, at the risk of getting this bogged down into law school, which I did not attend, this whole thing about it was in the Constitution, now it's not. I just want to be very clear. The right to an abortion was never in the United States Constitution. There was an interpretation, which actually the late and brilliant Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, though I may not have agreed with her, she was a very smart, very brilliant woman. She had questions about whether the law, that had been decided properly in law, and she certainly was sympathetic to the overall issue. We heard about it yesterday. It was in the penumbras of the 14th Amendment. So we're enshrining it differently. We're literally going to spell it out in our Constitution, and we're being told that we've got to do that because it'll set a new legal standard. But then we hear, well, so when we offer the idea to say, well, let's just be sure that word safely is in there. I don't know why it's a problem, but we put the word safely in there. It's like, well, that's not necessary because it's already in law. Well, abortion's already in law in Maryland. Well, no, we've got to enshrine a new. Why don't we just add the word safely? That would be an excellent thing to make sure that's part of the new legal standard. So that's all. I'm definitely supporting the amendment. Of course, I've already spoken in favor of the amendment, but I think it's important to note we're talking about words do matter. So if we need this amendment to enshrine abortion at any stage in our Constitution, then I think we need the word safely to make sure that that's clear as well as part of the new legal standard. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator. All right, questions on the amendment? If there's no further discussion, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote? Explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 32 votes in the negative, the senator's amendment fails. Chair recognizes the minority whip has an amendment. Pages will collect
Mr. President, yes.
and distribute the amendment. Senator may explain the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. This amendment touches on another important issue. It would have been great to tandem with the last amendment, but it is what it is. We will move forward. I think it's really critically important that we make it clear with this language that the decisions that we're talking about enshrining a new legal standard form are made with freedom of choice, and that they should be made without it should be clear as the new legal standard that someone has the right to make these choices without coercion, free from coercion of making a choice one way or the other about continuing or ending a pregnancy. We want to be sure that women are free to make this choice, and there would not be coercion. And coercion, of course, is, there's a legal, you'd have to prove coercion, and if you're talking about it from a criminal standpoint. But I think it's important that this be part of the legal standard, that we want these choices to be made free from coercion. So I would move the amendment, Mr. President.
All right, Senator moves the amendment. Let's hear from the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Again, respectfully, I would ask the body to resist this amendment. Reproductive freedom is the core principle of this bill. Freedom already contemplates free from coercion. It's already the idea, the concept that you are making this decision of your own free will. In fact, freedom is defined as the quality or state of being free, such as the absence of coercion or constraint in choice or action. We just don't need this amendment, and I would urge the body to reject the amendment. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator. On the amendment, are there any senators who have not yet spoken who wish to speak? If not, Chair recognizes the maker of the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. One of the reasons that when we were looking at this, and I did offer it in committee, nobody really debated it in committee, so I thought I'd try again here on the Senate floor and talk about the issue a little bit. Human trafficking is something we've spent a lot of time discussing in this state, and we've done a lot to try to make progress on that issue. We are a center. We have been a real hub for human trafficking in the past. I think we still have a huge problem with it, but we've been taking action in a very bipartisan way because we want to protect men and women who may be trafficked. One of the tools that traffickers can use to control young women is forcing them to, if they are pregnant, to go get an abortion. Oftentimes there's sexualization of minors that then they get them to where they are under their control because they're pregnant. So all of those issues, that's one piece. There's other times, of course, there's other ways someone can be coerced in these different decisions, but again, I think it's a strong message to say we just want to make it very clear in the legal standard that that you should feel free to make these decisions without coercion. So that's just to follow up. That's why I believe it is necessary. It's very necessary to have this language in the bill.
Thank you, Senator. All right, on the bill, or excuse me, on the amendment, any further discussion? If not, all in favor of the amendment say aye. Opposed, nay.
Roll call.
Well, Senator, do we really want the noes have it, the Senator's amendment fails. Are there any further amendments? Chair recognizes the Senator from the 37th District has an amendment. Pages will collect and distribute the amendment. All right, Senator may explain the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. Still passing out amendments. Here you go. So the amendment before you, colleagues, substitutes the word, it strikes the word freedom and substitutes the words health care choices. The way this constitutional amendment is drafted, it reads, has the fundamental right to reproductive freedom, including but not limited to the ability to make and effectuate decisions to prevent, continue, or end one's own pregnancy. And then it goes on to say the state may not directly, indirectly deny, burden, abridge that right unless justified. And then you can read the rest. This amendment is not a pro-life or pro-choice amendment. It was an amendment that was created after reading and contemplating the language in this constitutional amendment. This is an emotional topic. It is frequent to litigation, and these words I have no doubt will be tested in court. If you read the constitutional amendment after the word freedom, it talks about birth, ending a birth, just some very significant issues. What freedom doesn't include is mental health. The amendment, this constitutional amendment, is however you come to the argument about this issue, it's dealing with health. The items listed after freedom deal with the pregnancy mostly. They don't deal with the individuals who are given or this right is created for. And we all know there are a number of health factors that go along with this issue. And to me, the right to mental health services, psychological services, are just as important as those factors that are laid out in this constitutional amendment after the word freedom. I've got a picture hanging in my office, and it's a picture of an old clipper ship, and it's going across at what looks like a waterfall. And there are people hanging off of the clipper ship, and underneath the clipper ship, there's a little label, and it says, "I told you so." I think if you read this constitutional amendment and consider the enormous number of circumstances that can arise, realizing that mental health is a big part of this discussion, I hope you will see the justification for the needs of explicitly including the words healthcare choices. That's for the mother and the father. The mother and the father. And with that, Mr. President and colleagues, I would encourage the body to embrace this amendment. It is not a politically driven amendment. It's an amendment to make this language, to make the language in this constitutional amendment more effective.
All right, senators move the amendment. Let's hear from the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. And while I appreciate the sentiments of the senator from the Eastern Shore, as well as his focus on the importance of mental health care, I would still ask the body to reject the amendment. Reproductive freedom is about health care decisions, and it is also about other types of fundamental life decisions. Reproductive freedom is about the fundamental right to make decisions about if and when to have children. This decision impacts an individual's health as well as their educational goals, employment potential, and managing other family responsibilities. Let's return to our attention to the goals of this legislation. We are asking the people of Maryland to determine if reproductive freedom should be enshrined as a right in the Maryland Constitution, just as the opportunity was provided to the people of other states such as Kansas and Michigan. And again, I would ask the body to reject this amendment. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator. All right, other Chair recognizes Senator from District 6.
I couldn't agree more. That's why we need to put choice in that, if you don't mind, Mr. President. I believe that's one thing we should do. There's choices in life that we make and regret in life. But when you have the better opportunity to give people more choices, and not just a choice, you're giving the person the opportunity that they can have a child, that they can adopt, that they can do things that are beneficial for other families. Because there are some families that we know that cannot have children. So giving more choices and giving more opportunity is nothing but a good thing. And at times in life, we have to make decisions, and at times we don't have a choice. But at this time, in this moment, we do. And I think it's a good statement, and I think it makes sense. That's why I will vote for this amendment.
All right. Thank you, Senator. Chair, any senators who have not yet spoken wish to speak? If not, Chair recognizes the maker of the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President, colleagues. I'd just like to close and reiterate that the healthcare choices will ensure that the mental health services are protected also. Mental health services are very important. They're critical. And this amendment will help make sure that they are included. And I want to ask for a recorded vote, Mr. President.
All right. Question is on the amendment. Any further discussion? If not, the clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote? Explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 32 votes in the negative, the senator's amendment fails. Are there further amendments? Chair recognizes Senator from Anne Arundel has an amendment. Pages will please collect and distribute the amendment. Senator may explain the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. And first, let me say, I know this is a very passionate issue to me, and I know people on the other side, and I understand that. And I haven't gotten much up on the floor this year, but this is something I'm very passionate about. And I thought how to approach it. Most of you who know me, I'm an engineer. I look analytical, and I dive into it in strategy and look for solutions. But I said, I'm going to try something different today. I'm going to talk from the heart. We'll see how it goes. But you also know I have 7 kids, and I reflect back on that. Every child, I was there for their birth. And as I saw that baby come forward, I was full of joy. They were full of life. and just the thought of the potential of that child. And many of you have gone through that same situation. And then I think of a similar scenario that's authorized under this bill where a late-term viable baby is aborted. One brings unspeakable joy, and the other brings unimaginable pain and destruction. And those are the babies that I am fighting for. And I listened carefully yesterday during the floor report and the dialogue. And I heard everything about the woman. And I didn't hear once talking about the baby. Now, under this bill, there are no restrictions on late-term abortion, even up to birth, for any reason, at any stage. This sets a new bar. No protections for the baby or the viability in our Constitution. And any restriction we have in law today will be challenged in court because this sets a bar of no restrictions. And I would rather that we determine our intent today than leave it up to the courts to decide if those restrictions fall in line with this constitutional Unrestricted Reproductive Freedom Act. So what my amendment does is establishes sensible guardrails to rein in unrestricted late-term abortions. This is very personal to me because this bill decides who lives and who dies. We are proposing to add a right in our Constitution, but the fundamental cornerstone right starts with life. And if you don't have life, every other right that is given is meaningless. There's two sides to this equation. Yes, there's the woman, but there's also the baby. We must enshrine the right of a protection of life first and foremost, and let it be known in this constitutional amendment. So instead of enshrining abortions up into birth, my amendment clarifies that late-term abortions of viable babies are not allowed unless to protect the life of the woman or in cases of medical emergencies. Now let's talk about viability. That basically means this child can live on its own. It's not dependent on the mother, only on her not to kill the baby. That's the only dependent. It can live on its own. So let's cut to the chase. This amendment does not affect any abortion or any restriction up to viability. It's only after they're viable and they're capable and wanting to follow their dreams. Another way to say it is that these babies are asking Maryland to help them get a change of address, not a death certificate. Now, the advocates will frame this as healthcare decision and work to dehumanize the baby. These two lives have intersected and both need consideration and protection. In the 70s, we were told that the baby in the womb was just a blob of tissue. With the advancement of technology, we know that's not true. That's been debunked. We hear the heartbeat. We see active babies with fingers and toes and even personalities. And yet the advocates still push to make it an inanimate object that can be disregarded or discarded. And there's also been a push to soften or completely avoid the word abortion. Read this bill. You won't see the word abortion. You won't see the word kill. You won't even see the word baby. That's why this amendment is so needed. And when I think of the brutal nature of late-term abortions, which I will not go into because of the horrific images that we like to keep in the shadows, I ask, where is our compassion? I have been down here long enough to see compassion on this floor. for the downtrodden, the underrepresented, the bullied, even puppies and other animals. I've seen that same compassion in the death penalty, where we say the most vile and heinous criminal, life is valuable, and we won't kill them. And the most conflicting law that we have says that a pregnant woman and her viable baby are protected from a would-be murderer. And our law says if you murder that woman, you're going to get penalty for 2 lives, the woman and the viable baby. Thank you, Maryland. That is right. And we recognize that. And we enshrine that into our state law. But what boggles my mind is that while we show all this compassion to other people, to animals, to other viable babies, we deny that same compassion to other viable babies. Think of this policy. Maryland policy only provides protection to a viable baby simply based on who kills it. Let me say that again. Maryland policy only provides protection to a viable baby simply based on who kills it. The full weight of the law is there to protect and provide justice to one and turns a blind eye and authorizes it to the other. Does anyone see the cruel inconsistency of that policy? I have stacks of articles detailing late-term abortions in Maryland and clinics that offer it and problems with it, but I'm not going to read those and take up this time. But if anyone needs our protection, if anyone needs our compassion, it's these viable babies who have done nothing wrong. They're the most innocent in our society, and they just want to get on with their life. So in closing, Mr. President, I'm reminded almost daily we have prayers here. And they ask for us to have wisdom from God in our decisions. And I understand the conflict between secular worldview and God's view on life. But those who believe in God, we know that God loves us, and He loves all of us, including those in and outside the womb. In fact, we see scriptures that say, I know you in the womb, and I have great plans for you. And what that means is that God loves you and me just as much as He loves that viable baby. Now look, I don't stand in judgment of anyone. I'm an imperfect human, and I want to make that clear. But when I stand before God, and He said, what did you do to protect my children? I want to hear, well done, good and faithful servant. Rarely do we have the power of life and death within our hands. But today, if of any day, we need God's wisdom and the courage to act upon it. And Mr. President, I move the amendment and ask for a roll call. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Let's hear from the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. As I stated previously, Maryland's law has already established a viability standard that was enacted in 1991, ratified by the Maryland voters in 1992. Maryland's law prohibits state restrictions up to viability except for regulations for the life and safety of the pregnant woman. In response to the Senator from Anne Arundel County's discussion regarding abortions after viability, he talks about compassion, and I want to speak a little bit about that compassion. We've heard the stories also in our committee about these horrible decisions that pregnant women have to make with their families, with their health care providers. These are often women that at that stage in their pregnancy have picked out a name. They may have painted the walls on a nursery, and they have plans for the future, and they learn devastating, heartbreaking news. Each and every one of their stories is unique and heartbreaking. And as a legislative body, we cannot stand in their shoes. We cannot make clinical judgments for these very heartbreaking situations that they find themselves in. But what we can do is we can trust women. We trust them to make their own decisions, and we trust them to know what's best for themselves and their families. And therefore, Mr. President, I would urge the body to reject this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. On the amendment, any further discussion? If not, the clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote? Explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 33 votes in the negative, the senator's amendment fails. Senator has another amendment. Pages will collect and distribute the senator's amendment. Senator may explain the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. A little levity between all this. I tried it from my heart, so I'm going to go back to the engineer. So anyway, this is a very simple, I hope it's a friendly amendment. We've heard everything in the newspaper and all that this is a constitutional amendment to help women have their reproductive freedom, and this just tightens up the language. It says, instead of a person, it says a woman, and I would move the amendment. Thank you, and ask for a roll call.
All right, senators move the amendment. Let's hear from the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. I ask this body to also reject this amendment. Reproductive freedom is indeed about the right of women to make decisions about their own pregnancy, but there are other aspects about reproductive freedom that are about men. Reproductive freedom is about men's rights to make decisions about birth control, such as condoms, the right to get a vasectomy, birth control. Let's return to our attention to the fundamental purpose of this bill. We are asking the voters whether we should enshrine that fundamental right for reproductive freedom in our Constitution. So therefore, Mr. President, I would urge the body to resist this amendment. Thank you.
All right. On the amendment, is any senators who have not yet spoken wish to speak? If not, Chair recognizes the maker of the amendment.
Thank you. And I appreciate that answer. It surprised me, but if I could just ask a couple questions as I may withdraw this amendment.
Will the floor leader yield?
Yes.
Senator, may proceed.
Mm-hmm.
So this would apply both to men and women. Is that correct?
Yes, indeed. The way that the language is written could it contemplate both man and woman? Yes.
Okay, and then with abortion and so forth, are there any age limits put in this constitutional amendment, or would this apply also to minors?
Thank you for that question. So there already is a law on minors and parental involvement, if you're going to ask a question regarding about that. But there's already a law about access to abortion care, for example, in Maryland's law.
Okay, so I guess the answer is there's nothing in this constitutional amendment that deals with minors. It's open, it's unrestricted.
There's nothing in this amendment, Senator, because there is already an existing law about access to abortion care for minors.
And if there's a conflict, it can be challenged in court, and then they can find that out. Okay, thank you. And then are there any consent requirements for a minor? That's also not, there's no restrictions on that in the constitutional. I know there are in law, but there's nothing in this bill about that. It's unrestricted, correct?
There is nothing in this constitutional amendment about parental notification or permission because there is already a law that exists in Maryland statute on that topic.
Okay. Mr. President, I'm going to withdraw this bill and have a substitute based on the unexpected, which I didn't anticipate. Thank you.
All right. Senator withdraws the amendment. Or is there another amendment to the? Yes. Paige will collect and distribute the senator's amendment.
And I apologize. I just got the amendment on the floor, and I didn't realize you were going to answer that way. So if you would like to lay it over for a while, that's fine, or we can proceed.
I think we could probably take it up here.
Okay.
Let's see. Senator may explain the amendment.
Thank you. I always try to be prepared as an engineer. I didn't anticipate this, but I always try to be prepared. I had several amendments over here. So what we heard from the floor leader was this amendment is not only abortion, but it applies to men and women for reproductive freedom in a range of areas, such as a vasectomy. Now, I never knew what that was, as you can tell. But we also saw there's no age limit in here. So that could apply to a minor. And this bill gives a right to minors to change their anatomy so they're no longer capable of reproductive freedom. And if it's their choice in their body, that's what this does. There's no protection, just like with abortion, of parental consent, of saying that, when they're a teenager, they can change their anatomy because it's their reproductive freedom. This just simply clarifies that we're saying that if a minor wants to change their reproductive anatomy, they need parental consent. Very simple. But when we heard earlier the discussion that this bill basically did nothing, ladies and gentlemen, this is revolutionary. We are seeing it across America and the world where minors, while their brain is not fully developed, as we're constantly reminded, are making life-altering decisions. And this just puts protection in the law that says the parents should be involved in such decisions. And I move the amendment and ask for a roll call, please.
All right, Senator moves the amendment. Let's hear from the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Again, I would ask the body to reject this amendment. Under existing law, there are very few exceptions where a minor can receive health care or any sort of surgical operation without any parental consent. Gender reassignment surgery is not one of those exceptions. It already exists under law. I would ask the body to reject the amendment. Thank you, Mr. President.
All right, on the amendment, any further discussion? Any senators who have not yet spoken who wish to speak? If not, Chair recognizes the maker of the amendment.
Yes, and I'm just looking at the bill. And what this bill does, it sets the bar. And if it's in conflict with Maryland law, the Constitution wins. And when people want to do something and they say, you just gave us a right to do this, I'm going to take it to court and the Constitution's going to stand. And if it's our intention that we want parents to have consent or to get consent for this action, this is how we prevent that. If you want to let somebody challenge us and take it to court and say that parents have no rights, then don't take this amendment. But if you want to stand up for parents who are concerned of where we're going, we can put those protections in here. Thank you.
All right, on the amendment, Chair recognizes the minority whip.
Just a quick question, if I could ask the floor to yield.
Floor to yield. Appears so. Senator may proceed.
Thank you. In all the discussion today, I know the returning to its in current law and what the goal of this constitutional amendment is, from the perspective of the bill sponsor, and I think from your perspective. Can you talk about how strict scrutiny would affect what the gentleman from Anne Arundel just talked about? Can you respond to the idea that because this is now in the Constitution and the Constitution is viewed, this right would be viewed with strict scrutiny, that if we don't put any brackets around it, for lack of a better word, what he's saying is what the gentleman's saying is correct, right? That anything is really on the table if we don't define it under strict scrutiny.
Okay. Thank you for the question. And the strict scrutiny is the legal standard by which any challenge would be made in court as to any piece of legislation, statute, regulation, what have you. I cannot say. There could be lots of hypotheticals that could be presented and asked, like how would a court decide that based on the strict scrutiny standard? And unfortunately, I can't respond to that without a specific example. I mean, and even then, it would be very difficult for me to stand in the shoes of our courts to say how they would respond. I can tell you that strict scrutiny had been the standard, at least under Roe versus Wade. Obviously, we spoke about before about how Planned Parenthood versus Casey changed that standard. So there have been constitutional challenges in the past on certain restrictions on abortion, but I cannot say without a concrete example before me how a court would determine something. So
Okay,
thank you.
Thank you very much. So, Mr. President, I think with what we've just heard, and I think that's the correct answer, because hypotheticals are hypotheticals, and you don't know how courts would act. That's why it's really important for language to be extremely precise when we're talking about putting something, first of all, in our law, but especially in our Constitution. And that's why we all spend so much time looking at the bills closely to make sure we don't make a mistake. But when we're talking about the Constitution, we need to be very careful. So I support the gentleman's amendment and ask the body to join us in just making sure it's very clear with how we're going to apply strict scrutiny to this right. Thank you.
All right. On the amendment, any further discussion? If not, the clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 32 votes in the negative, the senator's amendment fails. Further amendments to the bill or its title? Chair recognizes the minority whip has an amendment. Pages will collect and distribute the senator's amendment. Oh, yes, Senator may explain the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is actually, everybody can take a little bit of a deep breath, because we're not going to be talking as much about the particulars of this, of abortion or women's choices, or I guess men's choices. This is just a process issue that I think is really important. The bill language on page 1 we just talked about how it's important to be precise with our language. The Article 48 of what would be added to the Constitution represents lines 16 to 22 on page 1. If you go down to page 2, where it lays out how the wording of the constitutional amendment on the ballot will be worded, it's cut out a couple of lines and it's altered and changed some words. It doesn't change necessarily the overall meaning, but I think we can all agree that if you add in or omit things, it can certainly change how it might be read by a voter who isn't following what we're doing here or following this debate. So my amendment, and boy, since none of the other amendments were accepted, we didn't have to redraw this amendment. My amendment would simply say that the language on page 1, that every person is a central component of an individual's rights to liberty and equality, has the fundamental right to reproductive freedom, including but not limited to the ability to make and effectuate decisions to prevent, continue in one's own pregnancy, et cetera, down to line 22. That should be what appears on the ballot. It doesn't add a whole lot of text. It's actually unusual, Mr. President, for us to put in bills what exactly will appear on the ballot. I remember in past constitutional amendments, up until the marijuana question last year, we generally left that up to the State Board of Elections, I believe. I could be wrong. I know for ballot initiatives, the State Board gets to decide. So I think it's really important that we put exactly what is on the bill into the Constitution. I wouldn't say this if it was, 3 pages of text, but it's just a couple more sentences, and I actually think it's really a good open government clarity to have. And so I would move the amendment, and I would ask for a recorded vote, Mr. President, unless it's accepted as friendly, which I think it's very friendly.
All right, the Senator moves the amendment. Chair recognizes the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. And while I appreciate the senator from Carroll County's suggestion, I would also ask the body to reject this amendment. This issue was actually raised in committee and was rejected by the committee. The ballot question does not have to be verbatim, word for word, what it is on the proposed constitutional amendment. And there's case law to support that. In fact, the case law states that the standard by which the question's validity will be judged is whether the question posed accurately and a non-misleading manner apprises the voters of the true nature of the legislation upon which they are voting. The language in the ballot question is sufficient, and I would ask the body to reject the amendment. Thank you, Mr. President.
All right. Have any senators who have not yet spoken wish to speak? If not, Chair recognizes the maker of the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. My friend from the Finance Committee is the floor leader is correct that it does not have to be exact, but in this particular case, I'm not sure why it doesn't make sense to just go ahead and do it because, again, as I said, it's not that much larger. But one of the things that the language in the constitutional amendment leaves out what we're talking about. It talks about reproductive liberty, but it doesn't talk about what that includes but is not limited to, which are important legal words. We have, what it leaves out is make and effectuate decisions to prevent, continue, or end one's own pregnancy. And I think that's an important thing to have on. The current amendment talks about reproductive liberty and says that the state may not directly or indirectly deny, burden, or abridge the right, but it doesn't really explain necessarily what that is, and I think it leaves open to a lot of interpretation. So, Mr. President, I would move the amendment and ask for a vote. I think it's actually a good, as I said, a good transparency thing, and I think it's good to be precise when we're talking about such a fundamental, important issue.
All right, thank you, Senator. Questions on the amendment? Any further discussion? If not, the clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Does anyone wish to change their vote? Explain their vote. If not, the clerk will take the call. With 32 votes in the negative, the Senator's amendment fails. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 798 is hereby ordered printed for third reader. We've got a layover calendar number 14. Clerk will read the bill.
Senate Bill 341, Senator Feldman, Public Senior Higher Education Institutions Reproductive Health Services Plans Requirements. Question is on the adoption of the two amendments offered from the floor by Senator Reedy.
All right, the question before the body is on the two floor amendments offered by the minority whip. Let's hear from the minority whip to remind us about those amendments.
Thank you, Mr. President. If I could remind the body, I wonder if we could remind the body what the bill does. Is that appropriate for me to inquire about what the? I'll talk about the amendment first, and perhaps the floor leader would be willing to.
Sure.
So this bill just quickly is asking, or it's going to mandate that every public four-year institution in our college institution in our state has to have a plan for abortion services, reproductive services, HIV prevention. There's a number of things dealing with contraception, education. But what it does not do,
Excuse me, Senator, one moment, just one moment. Just getting a little loud in here. If we could please give our attention to the Senator. If has side conversations, please, if we could take them outside. Senator, may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. What it does not do, what it's silent on at this point, is dealing with one of the statistics that's been used to justify why we should do this bill, and I think it's a fair point, is that there are a lot of students that drop out once they become pregnant. I think the statistic was about 38% of students that dropped out when they became pregnant. That may not be, I may not have that exact context, but it was a big number. And so what I'd like to do is add an amendment in that would have, as part of this bill, and it's actually being considered in the House of Delegates as well, to make sure that we have Title IX, that all of our universities, I'll read the amendment. The General Assembly finds that all students at an institution of higher education in the state, regardless of their gender, shall enjoy freedom from discrimination of any kind, including pregnancy discrimination as described in Title IX of the Education Amendments of 1972. So this would require these public institutions that are in the bill to adopt a policy related.
Mr. President, I don't think that this particular amendment has been distributed. I know you gave me a second.
Senator,
amendment.
I think it has. This was given out yesterday, so it was
Okay.
held over. It should be on the Senator's laptop currently.
It's Amendment 593827/1.
Senator, may proceed.
Thank you. So yes, basically each public institution of higher education shall adopt a policy related to pregnant and parenting students that's consistent with Title IX. So I think this is, again, a great opportunity for us to improve a bill a little bit and make sure we have the full scope of how we're looking at these issues of reproduction and childbearing, child rearing. And so I would ask the body's support for the amendment and hope that it's considered in a friendly fashion.
All right, Senator moves the amendment. Let's hear from the floor leader on the amendment.
Yes, Mr. President, and some of this will apply to some of the other amendments that I think are going to get proffered subsequently. But you know, we take a lot of pride in this body, in the Senate, being deliberate, and that's why we have hearings that have hundreds and hundreds of witnesses. We try to flush out issues. We don't wing it on the floor. So the gentleman brings up a body of law under federal law, Title IX, that's been in existence since the 1970s. It's a complicated area of the law, and as he mentioned, there is a bill getting into this issue over in the House of Delegates, of which there were 14 witnesses that testified. And so I think I made this point a little bit earlier. There are some issues, and I think this is one of them, where process-wise, the committee system here in the Senate works. And so to come on the floor and throw in something dealing with a federal law that, by the way, would apply to our public education institutions already. This is federal law, but to somehow put that into state law without the benefit of the University of Maryland system testifying, the 15 witnesses that did testify on these issues over in the House of Delegates, I think that's winging it, and I don't think that's really what we should be doing here. And so I don't know what will happen with that bill over in the House. The other thing I guess I would mention, these plans that are required are not due till August of 2024. If there are some issues that as I say, need to be vetted, flushed out properly under our system, there's ample opportunity in the 2024 session to have bill hearings in time for the 2024 August reports. But this is not a small topic. And again, this is federal law from the 1970s. It's evolved. Just throwing it into a floor amendment seems not the way to approach this. For those reasons alone, aside from policy and merits, I'd urge the body to resist this amendment.
All right. On the senator's amendment, Chair recognizes the senator from the 35th District on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to rise in support of the amendment. We've heard as opposition to this amendment that there's a different bill that's on the other side of the hallway that addresses that, and we should look at through that lens. But as we know, that bill may never make it across here. It was heard on February 14th. To my knowledge, there's been no action taken on that. And to me, good policy is good policy. If we can make this bill better, we should do it. I also would add that there's no cross-file on that bill, so we won't have that until after, after crossover anyway. And yesterday was brought up some also fiscal note concerns that we haven't been able to dig into that. So I took a look at the fiscal note from that House bill that is very similar to this amendment, and it says it in the last line that revenues are not affected. So one other thing, we look for bipartisan support on something. That bill was heard last year and passed in the House of Delegates 132-1. So there was broad bipartisan support for this amendment across the hall last year. So for all those reasons, I think this is good policy, and I would urge the body to accept this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. All right, any further discussion on the amendment? Are there any senators who have not yet spoken who wish to speak? If not, Chair recognizes the maker of the amendment.
Mr. President, just in tagging on one more point here. This is not intended to be a messaging thing. This is really important. And I respect what the chair of the committee said, and I do believe in the committee system is good, and I do understand the point of just coming out and throwing like a big bill on top of another bill. I get that point. The title of this bill is Public Senior Higher Education Institutions, Reproductive Health Services, Plans, and Requirements. It's about requiring these institutions to put together a full plan for reproductive services. It is incredibly applicable. It could not be more appropriate to have discussing and figuring out how to best and make sure we're best implementing Title IX requirements for pregnant students. It's narrowly tailored. We're talking about pregnant students. We're talking about a bill about reproductive health services. I can't imagine a more appropriate amendment. It's 3 paragraphs of legal texts on my amendment. It's not rewriting the whole bill. It's not adding in some trick. It's literally just trying to say, hey, just be sure this is part of this discussion, how we're going to provide for our pregnant students, our pregnant women that are attending college and want to make sure they don't lose ground. So, Mr. President, I hope the body will join me in supporting the amendment. I believe I asked for a roll call, but thank you.
Yes, all right.
Mr. President?
Yes, Chair recognizes the senator from Montgomery County on the amendment.
Thank you so much. Sorry to add my voice to this, but this is a really compelling issue for me. My parents were students during my early childhood, probably till I was about 10 years old. So I understand the position of the maker of this amendment. I understand the goals behind this amendment, and I applaud it. But I just want to urge the body also to resist this particular amendment. While he did mention it talks about pregnant students, it also talks about parenting students. And that's where those fiscal implications come in. There is incredibly important work that we need to be doing for our students who are pregnant and parenting on campuses. And it involves, as the chairman mentioned, a lot of conversations with the stakeholders and figuring out how we prioritize our resources to best support those pregnant and parenting students. The original bill was a student-led effort. The students from our university systems came to us and said, we have figured out what we best need on campus to meet our reproductive health care needs in this space. And we are continuing with a project with these students and others who are parenting students to figure out what they best need on their campuses in terms of pregnancy and parenting. We want to partner with the students. We also want to partner with our colleagues who have been doing incredible work in this body over the last couple of years to help parents. I would highlight the senator from District 40 who has done tremendous work on family and medical leave. The senator from District 39 who has done amazing work on child care subsidies. I think just in the last year, the child care scholarship program was expanded to graduate students, for example. The chair of the Finance Committee and the senator from 47 who did the express lane eligibility for SNAP and Medicaid program. That's the kind of conversation we want to have with our campuses to figure out how we can support the pregnant and parenting students on campus to keep them in school like my parents did when I was growing up. It sometimes takes parenting students longer. It sometimes means they need wraparound services and support. It's not cheap, but it's an investment that we need to make, and we need to do it right, thoughtfully, which is not an amendment on the floor. So with that, I would urge a rejection of this amendment, but a lot of progress on the policy behind the idea for the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. On the amendment, Chair recognizes the senator from Baltimore City and Baltimore County.
Thank you, Mr. President. I concur with the chair of my committee. I've passed legislation when I was in the House around protecting pregnant and parenting students in our elementary schools. We do still have an opportunity to do that. We can, hopefully, if the bill comes out of the House and we can pass that, it does take time. I feel I'm very sensitive to the desire to want to add this language to further protect our pregnant and parenting, but they are already protected under federal law. There are already significant accommodations, but I do believe that this body can take a more deliberate approach, a more specific approach. So I will be voting against this amendment.
All right, thank you, Senator. On the amendment, any further discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 31 votes in the negative, the senator's amendment fails. Senator has another amendment. Pages will please collect and distribute the senator's amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yes, there you go.
Senator may explain the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. So, a little bit different, not pulling in all of Title IX stuff here, but this is actually going to be, I think, maybe even a little bit more specific and precise. Simply want to, on page 1 of the bill, we want to add, and after page 1 down on line 23, we have line 22, they shall develop and implement a reproductive health and pregnancy services plan. So we're simply trying, and then we're also wanting to add pregnancy centers in as well. So we want to include a focus on pregnancy services and pregnancy centers as it relates to reproductive health services to go along with other types of services that we know that we see the bill is aimed at. So I think it's a good, tight, and narrow amendment just to say, hey, as part of your plan, let's be sure we can refer out and give access to not just a place, not just abortive services or contraception, but also pregnancy services and pregnancy centers. So I would move the amendment, Mr. President.
All right, Senator moves the amendment. Let's hear from the chairman on the amendment.
I would just make it similar to the point I made on the prior amendment. First of all, whether it's on campus or off campus, our health practitioners are required to provide information on a full range of healthcare options. That's part of the mix. On this one, this looks like an innocuous amendment, but for those of you who follow the discussion in this space, you'll know that when we talk about the term pregnancy centers, and again, this would be nice to flush out at a bill hearing, which again, we did not have the benefit of, there has been concern that some of these pregnancy centers, or sometimes called pregnancy crisis centers, involve places where there's misinformation provided. We've had talk about coercion. Well, that works on the other side as well. And so, again, I would say if we're going to throw something like this in, which is a charged term, it's not defined here. I don't know what it necessarily means or includes. That should be the subject of a full-blown hearing where people can weigh in one way or the other. That wasn't done here, and so for that reason, I think it's problematic, and I would urge the committee to resist this amendment, Mr. President.
All right. On the amendment, any further senators who have not yet spoke? Chair recognizes the senator from the 37th District on the amendment.
Yeah, I just want to speak in favor of the amendment. Colleagues, pregnancy centers are undervalued. The state, we put an enormous amount of money into family planning. Pregnancy centers have a very important role, and I support the amendment. Thank you.
All right. Any further discussion on the amendment? Any senators who have not yet spoken? If not, Chair recognizes the maker of the amendment.
Just in closing, Mr. President, I would ask for a roll call on this. To comment on what the chairman said, I notice reproductive health services is not defined in the bill either. So when we talk about there's no definition of a pregnancy center, I didn't talk about what kinds of pregnancy centers or where to go, just that it would be considered and be part of the plan, the access to places where there's services for pregnant women. That's what we're talking about here. So I'd move the amendment and ask the body for their support.
All right. Any further discussion? If not, the clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 30 votes in the negative, the senator's amendment fails. Further amendments to the bill or its title. Chair recognizes the senator from the 38th District has an amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have an amendment.
Collect and distribute the senator's amendment. All right, Senator may explain the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yesterday, during the debate, I brought up concerns about with the dramatic expansion of abortion with non-physicians providing abortion with our taxpayer dollars going into the training of the non-physicians to provide abortions and the additional abortion services that are being provided statewide, that the bottom line is I think we can all accept that abortion is much more easily and readily available in the state of Maryland, so much so that that Maryland is becoming known as a destination for abortions. Now, my colleagues know that I represent Ocean City. I live in Ocean City. I represent the Maryland's coast, and I've been a strong supporter of tourism. So I certainly want Maryland to be known for tourism and not as an abortion destination. What I was doing with my amendment to SB 341, specifically kind of focusing on our female students, and with this increased availability of abortion, is to make sure that there would be no coercion, just to have a policy on it. And when I was reading through the testimony in our committee about this, and reading from the University System of Maryland, they talk about the importance of the ability of students to access accurate information and procure reproductive health services swiftly, and they're saying that's an important part of any plan. And when we think about our female pregnant students and the relationship with the institutions of higher education, we want to make sure those pregnant female students are not discriminated or coerced in any way. If they're pregnant, they should not be barred from activities like sports. It should not affect their housing. It should not affect their scholarships. And there shouldn't be anyone in any role that would coerce a decision to have an abortion. So all this amendment does is, and I would think that, again, our universities who are being required to put these plans in place, that the universities, thinking that this is a good amendment for both our students, our pregnant students, our students who have questions, our students who need to access these services, and this is a good policy for our institutions to simply make clear that they have a policy that just prohibits coercion, a notification of that. It might also provide some liability for those institutions as well, just to provide that information. So my hope is that the floor leader would accept that as a friendly amendment, and again, a simple notification getting on the record that any type of coercion would be prohibited.
All right, Senator moves the amendment. Let's hear from the chairman.
Well, everything I said earlier about committee process applies even more so to my friend from Ocean City who's on the committee. We heard the bill. We discussed the bill in the voting session. This topic wasn't proffered then or discussed. So with that said, though, to the merits of the amendment, just to be clear, when you think about healthcare practitioners at least, and I'm not sure when we talk about coercion who sponsors referring to, but they are required under all their professional boards, absolutely required to ensure that any of the healthcare decisions being made or they're giving advice on are done of the patient's own volition. I mean, that if you coerce anybody into doing something against their volition, you could lose your license and all the like. That aside, there may be other people. I don't know. What I don't really know, because again, we didn't have a public hearing to discuss this topic, is if this issue of abortion coercion is a problem. If the sponsor, as I said on the earlier bill, wants to bring in a piece of legislation into the committee next session and demonstrate that abortion coercion is a problem and needs to be incorporated into the plan that is due August 1st of 2024, I think, we'll have a bill hearing and there'll be witnesses on both sides or on all sides. But the fact of the matter is, I don't think just throwing this into the mix without input from literally anybody is the way to go for this Senate, the deliberative body that we are. So for those reasons, Mr. President, I'd urge a red vote on this particular amendment. Thank you.
All right, on the amendment, any further discussion? If not, any senators who have not yet spoken wish to speak? If not, Chair recognizes the maker of the amendment.
Thank you, and I'll be brief. I appreciate the floor leader's guidance. Again, the thinking here was to get on record, especially with these institutions of higher education that are being directed to do these reproductive health services plans, just for them to simply have a policy that says it's clear that there will be no coercion. When we talk about coercion, it can be subtle. Thinking about students, female students at colleges that may be in certain situations that don't want to share information with their parents and may ask for advice on what they should do. There are subtle forms of coercion that we should be concerned about. And I just think that it's an effort really to protect our students and also to protect the institutions of higher education. And for those reasons, I urge a green vote. I appreciate my, my colleagues' consideration.
All right, on the amendment, any further discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 30 votes to the negative, the senator's amendment fails. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Chair recognizes the senator from the 38th district.
Yes, I have another amendment.
All right, give us just a moment. We'll collect and distribute. All right, Senator may explain the amendment.
This is an amendment I offered last year, and I believe that there was interest in it, and it's simply informational. And that is that it simply is to provide an informational brochure on the mental health impacts that may be experienced by a woman following her abortion, and also how to access the mental health services. So my colleague from District 37 mentioned before that mental health aspects of this, and that can be at any point. It could be when either a student has is either already pregnant, could be is dealing with decision making. It could deal with the abortion when a young woman has an abortion, that you simply provide information about the possibilities of mental health, about her mental health, about being able to, if she has any issues in this area, just where she could access those services. And again, this is there's studies that indicate that some women experience some mental health issues after an abortion. It could actually be immediately afterwards or down the road. All this does is just provide some simple, basic information so that that student would be able to follow up. This is not a mandate. It's just providing the information so she has access to that information and may know where to turn. So that's all this does, and I would appreciate it if it would be accepted as a friendly amendment.
All right, let's hear from the chair of the committee.
Thank you, Mr. President. Again, I wish the sponsor would have brought this to the committee when we were discussing the bill. But that aside, I think this is a conversation. I think we had a colloquy last year on the access bill where I was floor leader and Senator had brought this topic up. So a little deja vu. But I think there's two issues here with this amendment that are, I think, highly problematic. First of all, on the mental health aspects of this, two things. There is no services that have been more enhanced at our university system in Maryland than behavioral health and mental health services. And that has been a huge, huge investment by the universities, by our state. And so, but they don't distinguish between mental health services at the institutions for reproductive health care services or abortion. It's mental health, behavioral health broadly. This seems to sort of put it into this pigeonhole, which I think makes it a bit unworkable. But that aside, I think it also perpetuates a bit of a stigma, long stigma about abortion services and having mental health impacts. I think when we had this discussion on the floor last year, some of the studies the sponsor recited, I think, have been refuted. On the contrary, I recall having some studies, peer-to-peer review document, studies that had been done that made it pretty clear that mental health outcomes are actually better when folks have access and take advantage of reproductive health services, including abortion. So there's that. And then the informational brochure component of this bill, I don't know who's providing the brochures. I don't know if it's accurate information. There's no clarity here. Again, this would have been something we could have perhaps flushed out during committee with some witnesses. That's missing here. So for all those reasons, back on just one thing, on the mental health side, behavioral health investments, we now have hotlines for students when they're having issues on campuses and all kinds of other things. And again, that's not just for folks who are accessing abortion care services, reproductive health, but for all of our students. So I think the amendment is problematic on multiple levels, Mr. President, and for those reasons, I'd urge a red vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. All right, are there, Chair recognizes Senator from District 6 on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just real quick, I don't want to prolong this, but I think in anything and everything in life, we go through situations, and with this type of, I guess you can say, situation that somebody would go through, counseling is so important. We emphasize things that are happening in our school, very serious situations that we always make available counseling. We always provide something of, you could say, an alternative. If somebody has something in mind that it's bothering them, we have that alternative. They can sit down and talk with someone. And I think it should be available in this. I think it's just a common sense, basic amendment that we should vote for, because at any given time, we don't know the situation of the individual and what they're going through. And if you just have availability in some way, Mr. President, that they could have some type of counseling, or just to know that it is available. I think a brochure or something like that is something that should be readily available to that individual. That's why I'll vote for this amendment. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator. All right, any further discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 31 votes in the negative, the Senator's amendment fails. Senator has another amendment?
Yes, my final one, and it's very brief, and I really believe very narrow.
All right, let's put the pages. Will collect and distribute. All right, Senator, may I explain the amendment?
Thank you, Mr. President. If you look on the bill, page 2, line 3, it goes through what the plan, what is required in the plan. And as you go through it, it goes through and talks about the referral to off-campus services. It talks about the abortion care services, goes through that. And, all this amendment does is it requires that mental health services would be provided for a student in mental distress related to reproductive health in general. So if it's clear that a student is experiencing mental distress, that they have access to those services. So we talked about how mental health services are more available now in our institutions of higher education. This is just making clear that those services are available to those students who are in mental distress relating to any issue with reproductive health. So again, my hope is that would be accepted as a friendly, and move the amendment.
All right, Senator moves the amendment. Chair recognizes the chair of the committee.
Well, I do. Obviously, I appreciate the intent of the amendment. I will say, again, just to reiterate from the prior amendment, I mean, this connection or causation between reproductive health and mental health problems, I think, is problematic. It does, the stigma that has long been an issue here, I think this perpetuates that. And secondly, just from a workability standpoint, as I said earlier, the universities have spent a lot of money in broad-based mental health issues, and to sort of pigeonhole this specifically into the reproductive health care space, I think I think sends the kind of message that I do think is at odds with everything else we're trying to enact policy-wise in this state legislature and the Senate. So I would urge a red vote on this one, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Any further discussion on the amendment? If not, all in favor of the amendment say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. No. Noes have it. The senator's amendment fails. Do we have any further amendments to the bill or its title? Chair recognizes the senator from District 1. Pages will collect and distribute the senator's amendment.
Well, thank you, colleagues.
Hope Senator, give us just a moment. We got to get it into the system.
Anticipation.
Senator may explain the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, as we all do when we see a bill come through this esteemed body, we always look at the fiscal note to kind of understand what the bill is doing. And on page 2 of the fiscal note, it highlights to the extent that the higher education expenditures increase, it is assumed that the higher education revenues from fees charged students would increase accordingly. My amendment, colleagues, is an opt-out option for the fees assessed. I'm calling this a conscientious objector amendment. That is defined as an individual who has claimed the right to refuse to perform on the grounds of freedom of thought, conscience, or religion. Now, body, as I researched this, I found out that the European Court on Human Rights has recognized conscientious objectives in healthcare settings. They have a positive obligation under human rights to organize their health services in such a way as to ensure that it does not prevent patients from accessing lawful abortion services. This is found in RR versus Poland and PS versus Poland. My amendment is backed by the Center for Reproductive Rights. I repeat, the Center for Reproductive Rights. In closing, Mr. President, the African Commission on Human Rights and People's Rights supports this position. The Inter-American Commission on Human Rights supports this position. The World Health Organization supports this position of my amendment in their stated policy. So as long as a conscientious objector does not jeopardize a woman's timely and effective access to such services, my amendment will not prevent any woman from their reproductive health services in a public senior higher education institution. This amendment is, again, an opt-out of the fee charged, period. Mr. President, I urge a green vote on this amendment, and I think I'd like a roll call.
All right. Senators move the amendment. Let's hear from the chair.
Mr. President, I don't see how this amendment's even workable. Let me just be specific. Now, I think I mentioned during the original prior debates that currently many of our institutions already provide some of these services. There's no separate fee for anything like this. If for other institutions that there may be some financial involvement, as I mentioned, I think previously there's nothing in the bill that requires that the university actually pay for any of the services, so there may not be any fees, but if there are, the idea that there would be some line item specifically dedicated to reproductive health care services is something I can't answer. Again, I doubt the University of Maryland, I'm sure, has not weighed in. I don't know if the sponsor has checked with the university about potential fiscal notes, about changing their billing system. All those kind of questions, I think, make this, again, highly problematic from a practical workability standpoint. So for all those reasons, Mr. President, I'd suggest strongly that we resist and vote red on this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator.
Mr. President?
Let's see if there are any senators who have not yet spoken on the amendment who wish to speak. If not, Senator Maker of the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. Being a simple man, I'm relying on the fiscal note that provides every single bill here, and I get my information from it. And it says, again, to the extent that the higher education expenditures increase, it is assumed that higher education revenues from fees charged students increases accordingly. And such increases are generally assumed to be minimal. If the fiscal note says that it can be calculated, there is no reason that that algorithm and the dollar amount that comes to can't be communicated in said fee reduction for somebody who wants to be a conscientious objector. There again, this amendment does not, I repeat, does not stop a student from them getting their reproductive health services plans. Thank you, Mr. President. Urge a green vote.
All right, let's. Senator, any senators who have not yet spoken wish to speak? If not, let's go to the floor leader.
Yeah, just very briefly, I don't want the sponsor to misconstrue the point I was making. My point was, if there are additional financial constraints or dollars involved, it's not at all clear. You talk about algorithms. Perhaps that's true. Maybe they would spread it out through the entire university system of Maryland. The idea that we would then require, there's nothing in the bill that says that they must have some dedicated specific number or fee to assess to specific students. There's a lot here I can't discern from the way the amendment's written. So that's really the bulk of the objection to the amendment. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator. All right, any further discussion? If not, the clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 31 votes in the negative, the senator's amendment fails. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 341 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. We've got a special order calendar number 28. Clerk, read the bill.
Senate Bill 379, Senator Kagan, Election Law, Ballots, Processing, and Reporting Procedures. Question is on the adoption of the two amendments offered from the floor by Senator Heddleman.
All right, Senators, why don't we ask the maker of the amendment if we could be reminded of the amendment here?
Thank you very much, Mr. President. The amendment seeks to change the primary election date in 2024, as it is currently scheduled to take place on the first day of Passover. We would hope that in the future, the Board of Elections would do a grand search to determine when holiday schedules are and ensure that they don't conflict. I understand that's really difficult to do in the Jewish calendar since it's a lunar calendar and it's a moving target. But this is in response to that request that we not conflict and that we make sure that our election days are as inclusive as possible. So what the amendment does is it changes it from the date from April 23rd to May 14th. And in that way, we don't conflict with any Christian holidays, any Muslim holidays, or anything else that we can fathom at this point.
All right. Senators, move the amendment. Let's hear from the floor leader of the bill.
Thank you, Mr. President. As I said yesterday, but I appreciate the sponsor of the amendment clarifying again. This is a friendly amendment, and the committee is fine with this. Thank you.
All right. On the amendment, Chair recognizes the minority leader.
Thank you, Mr. President, and appreciate the comments we had before. Certainly not going to oppose this, but I think it certainly provides some evidence that we need to kind of evaluate just the timing of the elections going forward and also the span of elections. I mean, we're now into 10 days for early voting, and we're voting on Sundays as well during that period of time. So I think just an overall review of how we're doing things could be in order.
It's very fair, Senator. Yes, Chair recognizes the maker of the amendment.
Thank you very much. Totally fair. And one thing I did forget to mention, that this is not unprecedented. My understanding is that this was done back in 1991. So we're not breaking new ground here, and hopefully it won't happen again going forward, but just wanted to reiterate that.
All right, thank you, Senator. Any objections to the amendment? Without objection, the amendment is adopted. Are there further amendments? Chair recognizes the minority whip as an amendment. Pages, please collect and distribute the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. That's it. I'm sorry. Thank you. Mr. President, I
Senator,
first
explain the amendment.
want to apologize because I thought I had shared these amendments with the floor leader, but she only had an opportunity to see them a couple of moments ago. We had a few other amendments floating around over here, so my apologies. This is a very straightforward amendment, Mr. President. Simply adding, when we talk about ballot processing, this bill is all about, there's timing of when we count mail-in ballots, there's the process for curing ballots, and a number of other things in the bill. What we're trying to do here, this is something that is, several other states have this, and I think it's a good additional provision. It simply adds, there's a section of the bill under 9-303 that the state board shall establish guidelines for the administration of absentee or mail-in voting by local boards, and the guidelines shall provide for, and there's several things listed like the application process, ballot security, determining timelines of receipt, etc. We're simply trying to add just one more thing here, the verification of signatures on the absentee ballot envelopes. And it says each board shall verify the signature on the return envelope or ballot return envelope by comparing the signature with a voter's registration record. Now, I know the argument against the signature verification is I signed that when I was 18. I'm, a little older now. And so that's why it's important to note that the state board just has established guidelines and there's regulations. So you can establish guidelines that says it has to generally match. Obviously, I don't think anybody in their right mind would say a signature would have to match down to the jot and tittle exactly. But it's just an additional check to be sure that folks that sign the ballots, with the way these mail-in ballots have exploded, we are going pretty far down the road on, I think eventually we're going to end up where a whole lot of our vote will come in by mail. So it's important just to have some additional checks that are not excessively cumbersome. And so this is one I think it would be a good one, and so I would move the amendment, Mr. President.
All right, Senator moves the amendment. Chair recognizes the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Appreciate the efforts of the good senator from District 5, but this is not a friendly amendment. First off, this sets up two different processes. If you vote in person, if you vote early voting, there wouldn't be a signature verification. So this sets a different bar, a different process for people who vote by mail, which seems completely unreasonable and unfair. Second, while other states do have signature verification, Maryland is not one of those. We have had legislation that has been proposed. It has not moved out of committee. It has not been enacted. We have had amendments proposed on the floor that have not been enacted because we don't think that's Maryland's values. So I would urge colleagues to resist this amendment.
All right, on the amendment, further discussion. Chair, any senators who have not yet spoken wish to speak? If not, recognize the maker of the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. And in response to the response, yes, it would be different because you're mailing the ballot in. So of course we would have a different standard for mailing a ballot in. You have to have additional security. When you show up in person, they can eyeball you and you give them your name. You know at least who you are. Now, we could also pass for. They do ask. They can ask challenging questions. Exactly. You also, we could, there's other things we could do to secure the vote more in person, but I would just say that this is a nice additional piece of security that would be helpful in reassuring people about the safety of their ballot. So I would ask for a roll call, Mr. President, and move the amendment.
All right. On the amendment, any further discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 31 votes in the negative, the senator's amendment fails. Senator has another amendment. Pages will collect and distribute the senator's amendment. Senator may explain the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. I think I may have alluded to the great state of Oregon a moment ago, but the state of Oregon has been doing mail-in balloting for a long time. They actually do pretty much, I think all their elections are completely by mail. I'm not a fan of that, but I think we can look to the state that does that to get an idea of some good measures that we can make sure we take care of to tighten up as we talk about the sanctity of a ballot, security, and curing a ballot. This amendment would just put in place something that's a requirement in Oregon, that you, on your return envelope, not the outside envelope, there's an outside carrier envelope, and then you put it, then there's an envelope inside. You would simply be, it would have a, in addition to the prepaid postage, there is a place for the voter to provide in a manner that maintains the confidentiality of the information, either the last 4 digits of the Social Security number, voter's driver's license, or state ID number, or the voter's government-issued identification number. Let's be clear. We have had circumstances in this state, and we hear it. I'm sure your constituents have told you this. People will get ballots. They'll get multiple ballots at their home. They'll get ballots for someone that passed away 4 years ago. They'll get ballots. People will move and not get their ballot and get somebody else's ballot in the mail. So this is just making sure that this would really make sure that there's not going to be fraud, and even at a smaller level, and that there's security for it by doing this. If we're not going to do signature verification, I think this is this is another way that we could go about making sure that as we expand mail-in voting more and more, that we have the confidence that it's being conducted fairly and that every legal vote can be cast and counted properly. So I would move the amendment, Mr. President, and ask for a roll call.
Senator has moved the amendment. Let's hear from the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. We do a lot of work in this body on protecting personal identifying information. The great senator from District 9 works on cybersecurity and tries to avoid hacking. Asking voters, and just those who are voting by mail, for the last 4 digits of their Social Security number will make their identity vulnerable. Here's the deal about how Social Security numbers are presented, in case you don't know, and I've worked on this years ago. The first 3 digits are related to your zip code, which is kind of easy to know and to get. The middle ones are mostly random, but it's only the last 4. When anyone ever asks for what are just the last 4 digits of your Social Security numbers, those are the only 4 digits that are unique to you, and those you should protect zealously. So the idea that we want voters who are choosing to vote by mail to give this personal identifying information is opening up a can of worms that we do not want to do here in Maryland. I would urge you to resist this amendment, and let's move forward with the bill. Thank you, Mr. President.
All right, on the amendment, Chair recognizes the minority leader on the amendment.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Just the floor leader yield again, please.
Floor leader yield appears so. Senator may proceed.
In your concerns there, who actually are you worried about getting that information?
So I don't tend to start from a place of paranoia, but just think about the number of people who could touch your ballot, your mail-in ballot. So first it could be dropped in a mailbox at the post office, so there's that whole journey. Then it gets processed at the Board of Elections, and we trust our boards of elections. And then, so it goes through, it touches a lot of hands. And I think that we don't want to have to worry about having that personal identifying information vulnerable and visible when it's not in our law. And I will quote my chair in the prior bill, which is, if this is something you want to consider, I think we should have a full bill hearing and not just bring it on the floor as an amendment without understanding fully the implications.
Just to go back then a little bit further, how is the Board of Elections assured that a mail-in ballot is from the individual that is supposed to be mailing that ballot?
Thank you for the question. Fundamentally, as in many laws in the state of Maryland and around the country, there are consequences. It is a felony to pretend to be someone you're not, to cast a vote for someone else, and our boards of elections do a zealous, careful job of making sure that they are rejecting any vote or questioning any vote, researching any vote, contacting the voter, anything that does not sort of fit the right criteria for a legal ballot.
So you're saying there's only consequences. Is that right?
There would also be who has access to the ballot. So if it's mailed to you at your home, Senator, it's not the neighbor around the corner that's going to have access to it.
As my colleague mentioned, we've heard a lot of stories that households are getting multiple ballots for people that are no longer there.
It has happened. It's one of the reasons why updating databases are so important and why Maryland was a founding member of ERIC, the electronic research, I'm forgetting the acronym, sorry, Information Center, which keeps our databases, our voter databases updated across state lines too.
Right, but that should be something that is more proactive, right? That they should be, assured that the ballots are going out to the correct people. But when they go out to the wrong people, when multiple ballots go in, what I'm asking then is what is assuring the State Board of Elections that those ballots are then coming from the right people? There isn't anything, right?
There's a consequence if someone were to cast a ballot that they should not have cast on behalf of someone else, or a duplicate ballot.
Do we know how that would even be investigated? I mean, what would trigger somebody to say in the State Board of Elections that, you know what, maybe this ballot didn't come from the right place? Let's launch an investigation to see if the only consequence we have to sending ballots in illegally, what triggers that? Nothing?
This is not an issue that we have faced in Maryland or around the country. When there have been analyses, they have found virtually zero evidence of fraud in Maryland or anywhere else. And I can tell you an example. So one of the aspects of this bill is if there are 2 ballots that are received from one person, and there is legislation that is before us this year to strengthen that, which has not yet moved out of committee. Hold on. So if someone asked for a mail-in ballot and then they were worried because they hadn't gotten it, and so they show up at early voting and they cast a ballot, that would be 2. And then they had sent in their mail-in ballot and they hadn't gotten it logged in. That would be 2 ballots from the same person. We're only counting one of them, so it's the first one that's legally sufficient.
I would agree, but that's very obvious. 2 ballots come in with the same name. Okay, there's a problem. My concern, again, goes back to multiple ballots mailed to an address that those individuals are not there anymore. There's the possibility to collect ballots. I could walk down the street and say, I'd like your ballot, I like your ballot, I like your ballot, have a number of ballots, mail them in, and there's no way for the State Board of Election to tell whether it's actually that individual that sent in the ballot, right?
Senator, we don't have an issue with fraud in Maryland. We have a careful process, and this bill makes it even clearer and tighter.
Well, thank you, Madam Vice Chair. I would tend to disagree with that, Mr. President. I think if we don't have a way to look at the data and the way to investigate this, then we can't tell if we have a problem or not. We could tell if we had a problem if we had signature verification and ballots came in with multiple names on it. This is just ballots coming in without any type of verification on who they're from. And I think the amendment is something that, again, we have been talking about for a period of time to make sure that people are comfortable and with the security of their ballots. This is something that doesn't, may not need its own bill hearing. It might be nice to, but I think that we are all able to offer amendments here on the floor that can be discussed in this same type of manner. We shouldn't be saying that just because this doesn't have a full bill hearing that we're not going to evaluate and accept amendments. So, Mr. President, I would again suggest moving the amendment.
All right. On the amendment, any further discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote? Explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 30 votes in the negative, the Senator's amendment fails. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 379 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. All right, Senators, the desk is clear. Desk is clear. However, the work is not done. The work is not done. Chair of Finance.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Finance will meet at 2:30 today for bill hearings, followed by a voting session.
Working hard. Thank you, Madam Chair. Chair of Education, Energy, and the Environment.
Thank you, Mr. President. The EEE Committee will meet at 2:30 for voting. Thank you.
2:30. Thank you. Chair of Budget and Tax.
Thank you, Mr. President. Budget and Tax is off for the afternoon.
All right.
A quick reminder to everyone, just so they know sort of the process of what's going on right now. Over in the House, they will probably pass out of committee the budget today, which means we will then have a product to work off of. There being the first House this year, we work off of that. Next week, we will do the same thing. So by Friday, we will pass a budget out of Budget and Tax. So that's what's going on.
Busy times.
Rest
busy
up.
times. Absolutely. All right. Chair of Judicial Proceedings. Nada. Other standing committees. Delegations. Caucuses. Yes, Chair of the Baltimore County Delegation.
Thank you very much. We will be hosting or having a meeting at 4 p.m. on Monday in the Schweinhart Room.
Excellent. Any further business before the body? Yes, Chair recognizes the Minority Leader.
General announce. Thank you, Mr. President. Just a reminder for everybody that District 36 is having our Welcome to Annapolis night, and it's down at the Market House. Is that right? Market House down in Annapolis by the city docks at 5:30.
On Monday.
So all are welcome on Monday. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Chair recognizes the Chair of Executive Nominations.
Thank you, Mr. President. Executive nominations will meet at 5 o'clock on Monday. You should have your list, and if you have anyone appearing, you should have an email specifically telling you that. Have a good weekend. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Any further business on this Mario Day? Yes, Chair recognizes Senator from the 37th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm going to take off my Protocol Committee cap and put on my District 37 cap. And it is Women's History Month, and today is an important day for our district. It marks the date of the passing of Harriet Tubman, who was from Dorchester County. She passed away in Auburn, New York. But on this day, March 10th, 1913 was that anniversary.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator, for that observation. Thank you for bringing that to our attention. Any further business before the body? If not, let's do a quorum call before we adjourn. Oh, wait, up one moment. Yes, Senator from Prince George's.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the Senate of Maryland stand
Oh,
adjourned.
one moment. Oh, sorry, I'm sorry. My apologies. We have to do a quorum call first, Madam Deputy Majority Leader. Quorum call, please.
Mr. President?
All right. Has everyone recorded their presence? If so, the clerk will take the call. With 44 members in the chamber and a quorum being present, the Senate of Maryland remains in session. The Chair recognizes the Deputy Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the Senate of Maryland stand adjourned until Monday, March the 13th at 8 p.m.
Excuse, let's make sure we say that again.
Thank you, Sally, for correcting me. I move that the Senate of Maryland stands on recess until Monday, March the 13th at 8 p.m.
All right. Without objection, so ordered. So ordered. Have a wonderful, phenomenal weekend, everyone.